Lead with Legacy, the official podcast of IOL Global. Here, we will explore leadership that outlives titles and trends. Through conversations with faith-based and marketplace leaders, we will discuss integrity, conviction, and purpose. To learn more about us, visit us at iolglobal.com.
All right, David Nickens. Wow, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Chambers.
Been a while.
It has. I don't know how many years it's been.
Yeah, it's been a little while. Before we start, let me just say it's great to have an old friend, David Nickens, here. We're going to get into a discussion with him about teamwork and about this weird world of engineering, I guess. That's not a world that I understand, but I think it's going to be a great discussion. But before we jump into that, if you are listening to the podcast or watching on your favorite platform, then just remember to like and subscribe. And we're on all these different platforms. I can't name them all. iHeartRadio and Spotify and I guess every other YouTube or whatever the case may be. So just like and subscribe. If you want to get more information, you can also check the button and we'll send you a link. David, it's great to have you on. It's been a long time. Even though I kind of watch you on LinkedIn over the years, I've kind of kept up seeing what's going on with your work and with your life and so on. But I noticed when they first set the podcast up, the note came across my desk and it said, well, that we met while I was working on a Navy project and you obviously work on Navy projects, but that's not true. We actually met in church.
Yep.
We met many years ago, my gosh, at a church in Chesapeake area. And that's how we first got connected. And so as we jump in here, I just wanted to correct that in case it got out there. But we both did. David works for a company. I'll let him tell about that. And I did two different two-year projects with the Navy there in the Portsmouth, Chesapeake area. And so we do have some shared background there. But most of our background has been through church stuff. So, David, tell us about where you work and what you guys do. What you can tell us.
So I work for a company in Norfolk, Virginia called Tablet Manufacturing. We do a lot of work for various factions of the government, the Navy, the Army. We build some parts for Marines. Our main business is our enclosures, electrical enclosures. We build boxes for all the distribution boxes for the Navy. Do it from cradle to grave, raw material to make the box, and then populate the electronics in the boxes.
Wow! So you make the box, but then you put the stuff in it that needs to go in it based on the requirements. Okay. What about installation? Do you install the stuff, or that go to someone else?
No, we don't do any shipboard installation. Most of our direct customers are actual direct contracts to the Navy. So we don't have to do the installation. Our direct customer does the installation. For the items that we sell directly to the government, again, we sell it to them and they put it in their supply chain.
I see. How did you get involved in this? I remember, if my mind is still there, I remember a number of years ago sitting down with you and your beautiful wife and talking about where you were going to go with your career. That's back when I had all my hair and most of my brain, and you had all of your hair. Tell us how you kind of got involved in this in the first place.
So my engineering background actually started when I was like 9-10 years old, when I got my hands on a scale model airplane blueprint. And I spent days upon days staring at that thing and fascinated with just the dimensions and everything. So I started this process all the way back then. In my 20s, I kind of took a sideline and did other things that did not follow my engineering desires. But And that was around the same time that I met you, when I was actually correcting the course and
Right.
getting to where I knew my skill set really was best. You and I kind of converged on that at that same point.
Right.
So
I
from
remember
the point that
sitting.
you and I met until now, that's really been where my true trajectory started.
Yeah, I remember several times going to lunch with you and Amy and sitting and talking about, what you were doing at the time and what you wanted to do going forward. Sometimes it's just good to bounce stuff off of someone. And when there are times in our lives when we course correct, we go back to what's our passion. Talk a little bit about that. The back from childhood up through your 20s and then making a decision to do what you're doing now. What did
Sure.
that look like? What did that journey look like?
So when I got my hands on those blueprints, maybe it was a little bit later than 9 years old, because I believe it was within a year that my parents actually got me a drafting table.
Really?
They went out because they knew that that was my interest, and they wanted to kind of foster that interest. So I started just drawing things up, trying to redesign airplanes and whatever could come to my mind. At the same time, I was also a tinkerer. I was taking things apart, trying to put things back together when things were broken. Like, the boombox radios that were popular back in the 80s. I took a few of those apart. Some of them I couldn't put back together.
Right, right, right.
And then in high school, freshman year of high school, when I was still living inside Buffalo, I went to a technical high school, and my main course was CAD/CAM robotics. Had I stuck through all 4 years at that high school, I would have graduated with the knowledge to be able to program robotics, to be able to do certain functions. And that was in the 90s, early 90s. Um, and then after my freshman year, my sophomore year, I moved out of Buffalo and to a city outside of Buffalo, Tonawanda. And the next 3 years of high school, I took every drafting class, even took some electronics classes that I could. I joined the Air Force after leaving high school with the intentions of being an aircraft mechanic and eventually getting an A&P license, and then getting an engineering degree that's focused on being able to design aircraft.
Mm.
Um, it was during that time frame where I started making some bad decisions when I was in the Air Force.
Well,
Uh,
we've
it,
all
it,
made some bad decisions.
that's true. It's kind of funny that it's come full circle. I'm not designing aircraft now, but in my tenure here at Tabit, I've been involved in many design projects where we're designing things that go on Navy boats, on their vehicles, on aircraft, designed some commercial work, the things that go on Amtrak trains. So it's kind of come full circle where my original desires back when I was graduating high school, I'm not designing aircraft, but I'm designing everything else that goes around it.
Right, right. And what happened to you in terms of your faith that caused a course correction in your life? Because you not only changed course a little bit career-wise, but basically your life changed, right?
Yes, overnight, almost. Maybe it wasn't really overnight. It felt like it was overnight. My wife and I, we were going through some personal issues, and then we decided to start going back to church, the same church that I met you at, and we recommitted our lives to Christ. And probably within a month, I started seeing different things come into play. I was already going to school to get a drafting degree. I was about, I think, 6 months out from being able to graduate from that program. And within a month of me recommitting my life to Christ and changing my personal habits, I got my first job as a drafter. And in that role, as a drafter, I was privileged to be able to design hundreds of different components for the Navy class subs, as far as like the furniture, different cabinets, different safes, different sheet metal parts that went on that.
Yeah, I remember talking to you about it because I had a contract um, as well. We were redesigning the leadership development program at the shipyard at the time. Tell me a little bit about your experience with teamwork. When did you move from like just working on stuff yourself to working like on a team kind of experience?
That I would say that started when I got to Tabit. My previous experiences, I had a role to fill, whether that was programming machines or drawing parts or even planning for shops. It really wasn't a team effort. That was me do my job and go home. And when I got to Tabit, the owner at Tabit, which he's been a great leader over the years, he saw in me what others didn't really see, and he gave me the space to grow. He gave me tasks. He didn't tell me he didn't he didn't micromanage me in those tasks. He gave me a task, I did the task, and I figured out through that process that if I would communicate with the people in the shop more, different leaders in the company, I got better results.
Yeah, so
And through that,
you're working around a lot of engineers. What other kinds of roles are there besides? So with engineering, you've got projects going on all the time, right?
yes, continuously.
And so you
Multiple.
interact with other engineers, but what other kind of people do you interact with?
I interact with everybody in the manufacturing shop, from the production manager all the way down to the people grinding welds.
You're interacting with all of these different people on, let's say there's a new project and they're putting the pieces together. Do you guys meet like in it with a project leader, a project manager? How does that work?
Yes. So currently I have 3 project coordinators, and they're all assigned to certain customers. So when we have a new project coming up, I'll meet with the project coordinator. And first at that point, we'll review all the requirements. If there's any gaps in the information that's passed on from the sales team, then we meet with the sales group and fill in those gaps. And then after that, if we already know what process we're going to take, whether we're going to bend the parts on this machine or that machine, then we start rolling with that and communicating with the engineering group to to share with them what we believe the task should be as far as their programming.
And to communicate, do you use computer software like Microsoft Teams or any kind of things like that? Or you guys just meet in person?
We do both. I have weekly meetings with the project coordinators, weekly meetings with the engineers. We have monthly meetings with the whole group together. And in the intermediate, we use different lists and tasks on Teams in order to communicate a lot of that information. But I find that the in person, face to face has a lot more impact.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. So, how about taking responsibility for things when they don't work? How does that work in your environment?
To me, taking responsibility for things that don't work, whether it's because of a failure in a machine or you made an error on planning, programming, or drawing, um, I expect everybody in my group to take responsibility. And I've shown them over the years that I will take responsibility for everything that I do, whether it's in my control or not. And it's not taking responsibility of this is messed up. It's more of I'm taking responsibility to find the solution.
Right. Okay.
What happened? You do the root cause analysis and figure out where the issue went. And then that way you can learn how to correct it on this project and moving forward on other projects.
So it's a constant, continual improvement process from probably from start to stop, right?
Yes. And even after you're done with the project, you go back and you figure out your wins and losses so that you can do it better next time.
Yeah, because at the end, at the closing of a project, you've got this time of reflection and kind of rethinking what worked, what didn't work. Quality control, talk about that a little bit. How do you guys manage that in terms of your teamwork?
So our Tabit, we are ISO certified, which means our quality systems fall under certain guidelines and a certain rigor.
Right.
Uh, and with that being said, we held probably quarterly quality training groups to train various individuals in the company on what our quality standards are.
Okay.
We believe that quality is inputted from the beginning of the project, right? All the way down to the salesman. If there's an error in the quote, then there's probably going to be an error by the time you ship the part. If
Right.
there's error in the planning or in the drawing, the programming of the machines, then that's going to go downstream and affect production and also affect our ability to ship not just that project, but other projects on time.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And for those who don't know, the ISO standards, they're across the board, right? For engineering, for manufacturing, there's all these standards. I know I've used them in my projects, but more from the learning development side. But there are these various standards that you guys have to meet on a regular basis.
Yes. And it's not just manufacturing. They use the ISO standards in many different industries. Uh, it's a means of being able to track where you're winning, where you're losing, and having proof on being able to improve on your processes.
Now, are your project coordinators and other people, have they been trained formally in project management, or is it something they kind of grew up with?
No, it's actually I've trained them.
Okay.
Um, this process was created by me when I took over the engineering group. Prior to my taking over the leadership role, there really wasn't an engineering group. There was two people. One of them was getting ready to retire, and so he had pretty much stepped away from any processes. He was done. And then when I took over the role, I redeveloped the entire front end process to streamline everything and get everything done before it needed to go to production. But that being said, the project coordinator role, that was something that we created and we developed different processes in order to make them more successful. Now, I do have a couple project coordinators who it comes natural. So it really wasn't a hard learn for them.
Right. But you did run them all through some kind of training so they're on the same page and understand, what your expectations are and so on.
Yes. And it's there's really no closed end training program for that. It's more of a continuous every day they're learning something new. I've been in the industry for a couple of decades now and I'm still learning different
Right.
things. Yeah.
So your growth and development as a leader, talk about some of the challenges and maybe some of the real success points. I know in my case, I didn't have formal training, project management or anything like that, but when I look back, my whole life's been about managing projects. From the first things that I ever started doing, the first jobs I ever had were managing projects. So when I finally did some formal training, it was all kind of, I thought everybody knew how to do this kind of stuff. But then when I got on really big projects, I had some serious learning curves. When I went from a small team of people to a massive amount of multiple teams and people across different industries and different countries, that was a real big wake up for me about stepping up. So, talk about some of the things that you had to go through in your leadership development. What went easy? What didn't come easy?
I would say that my biggest challenge was trust. Always assumed that because I was capable of doing a task and put in a role to do the task, that I would be trusted to do it. And it became evident that it's not just your capability, it's your consistency and your integrity in the process. And that was a hard learn from me. Probably about 6 months with me taking the role, I started asking questions of the other leaders who I always consider myself on an equal ground with them while I've been at Tabit because rather than even though I didn't have the title, I still had all the responsibilities and consistent communication with them. But I learned quickly that uh, just having the title and having the capability, they still didn't trust me because I wasn't in the position long enough to show that I would be consistent with how my leadership was going to work.
So how did you build that trust? Just being consistent over time?
Communication, being consistent, allowing the other leaders room to speak their mind. That it kind of leans on my gift of patience. I'm a really patient person. At times it could be a downfall, but most of the time, because I'm patient, I am able to sit in a room with other leaders yelling back and forth, and I can be quiet and just listen. And then when I speak, they know that I'm speaking with some substance.
Yeah, so listening is something we've dealt with on the podcast before. Um, it sounds like even in your environment, being able to listen beyond just what's going on. I mean, there's a lot of noise in a team meeting. There can be a lot of noise, a lot of opinions and this and that. What you're hearing on the front end with the noise may not be really what's going on. You got to listen deeper. And I think people have to, that's a great connection between trust and listening, because I think that's how most of us build trust with people that are working with us, is to learn to listen to them, hear what they're trying to say, process it, not jump to conclusions, and so on. What's some other things you had to work on?
The fact that everybody doesn't think the way I do.
Oh,
Like you had mentioned earlier, that there's times when you're like, oh, people don't already know how to do this. I can look at a part and just instinctively know how to draw it. Or I can look at a drawing and instinctively know how that bent part should be unfolded.
right,
And I would go through training with a new programmer, and I would tell them, just unfold it in your head. And they didn't understand what I was talking about. And it's a constant reminder to me. And I talk to other leaders in the company that we have to remember that they haven't been doing it as long as we have, or they don't have the natural instinct. So we can't expect them to see the things we see. We have to
right.
develop it.
Do you think there's a difference, or what do you think the difference would be? You didn't grow up with a computer, right? You didn't start out with a computer. And now you're surrounded, I know, by all this technology and stuff. So you think there's a difference in those of us who grew up having to do things manually, and this next generation or two that starts out with technology?
I've had that same discussion with one of my lead drafters. He grew up in this new era where he didn't learn how to do drafting on a drafting board or T squares. He learned it on a computer. He would insist to me, and he's probably one of the best he's definitely one of the best that I know, as far as being able to create things in a 3D environment. And we would have discussions, and he would try to bet me that he can do something quicker on there than I could do. And you're right. If you don't have that manual experience, I felt like there's always a disconnect between the virtual world and reality.
Mhm.
Uh, but in today, 2026, it's even further disconnected from the manual world. And we have to find the balance between what is good fit in virtual, AI, new technology versus the manual side.
Yeah, I found that too in my work. It's I had to grow up thinking about things like how the brain works, how people learn. My thing of uh basically my world has been about helping people master knowledge, skills, attitudes, and habits that move their career forward or move their, capabilities forward. And I still remember having to draw stuff out on paper, how to understand how the brain works, how processing works, all manually, writing it, reading, doing that kind of stuff. And now you can just ask AI to explain it to you. And it's a whole different thing. Are you guys beginning to leverage AI in your work?
Definitely. This industry has been obliterated over the last 20 years with the constant push for getting our youth to go to college to get a degree, and not focusing on trades. We have a huge gap in skilled trades. So that leads us to, okay, so how do we fill that gap if we can't get a person in here to even train them how to do it, let alone get somebody that already has a skill? we have to leverage technology. Um, uh, and that's not just AI, that's also using the robotics, the options to be able to program a machine that nobody has to learn how to operate. They just have to put a part in there. We're also using AI to leverage information on the front end to help develop work packages and analyze data, so that it makes us better and quicker on the front end, and gives the production area longer, more time to be able to make the parts.
Okay. When it comes to AI, it's a question that comes up once in a while in some of my discussions, and that is, how do you use AI yet to solve problems or just to provide information? Both?
So we currently AI language that we currently are using. We have subscription that it's a corporate subscription that keeps all of our information within our database. So the AI model is not learning from our information. So I've spent probably a year and a half to 2 years now, basically training it, constantly feeding it information about the company. So now I can go to it and say, hey, on this machine, I'm having this problem. How can I fix it? And most
Okay.
of the time they'll help. We also use it um, to make it easier to create work instructions or other type of documents, where in the past I would be sitting there for hours typing.
Like step action, like step 1, 2, 3, how to do something?
Those plus different standards,
Yeah.
work partnership standards that we would have,
Right, right.
or even contracts that we have to create for the government.
So it's over time, you're saying you had access to the AI and you're training it by giving it information that's proprietary to you guys or the work you're doing. So it's learning what you're doing, not just from the general public, but it's learning specifically from what you guys do.
Yes, yes, definitely. And we're working on a current project with the that the Navy's funding, that this outside company leverages it even more. They'll create workflows using the AI and using our current infrastructure that will streamlines the whole process on the front end.
That's great. That's really interesting. I know there's a lot of interest in AI now, good and bad. Some people think it's going to blow up the world and take over, and uh, I haven't used it that much. I do use it some uh, when I have a question about something that I'm not familiar with. I want a quick study on something. I do, and this is outside the scope of the conversation, but I do quite a bit of work now editing books, textbooks and things like that. And so, used to, if I needed a citation or a reference to something, um, I can, I know how it works. I know where to go to get that stuff. But I've found myself being a little more um, AI savvy now. I can just ask it, keep it open and ask it who made this quote, who quoted this or whatever. And then we use plagiarism checkers, on all the books and articles and stuff that go out to make sure that we're not violating any standards or agreements and so on. So it's kind of helpful for that. But I haven't really got into like deeply using it for anything. So it's always interesting to hear what people are doing with it. Um, Let me switch gears a little bit. Talk about some leaders that have really influenced you, especially when it comes to project management, teamwork, leadership, those kind of things. Who are the people that have really had an influence on you over your career now?
So personal influences, I would say, you had a big influence on me. Um, one of the biggest things I think that you influenced me is that um, when you're a leader, you will make decisions that others may not understand because they don't have all the information. Um, Bob Groves, he influenced me a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, he he he's actually doing emotional intelligence training um, in the corporate world. And during some time under him, he mentored me on that same aspect on emotional intelligence, being able to read people and respond to people based on who they are, and not just the situation
Right,
itself.
right. Valuable stuff. Really
It-
good stuff.
Intelligence in leadership is greatly important. My current boss, the owner of the company, Jeff Jaycox, he's has a huge impact on me because every company I've ever worked for, I have not seen any owner of a company, especially one this size, that's willing to throw his tie over his shoulders and get his elbows dirty in the manufacturing spot, man. And he's been very steady in his leadership, incrementally growing the business as well as incrementally making smart improvements to our processes. And then outside of personally, I study a lot of John Maxwell. I've probably read at least 10 of his books.
Right. So have we
And
all.
they're greatly impactful, and they play a role in everything that I do.
And you can read them. You can read it once, come back to it a couple years later, and just get a whole bunch of stuff from it again. I just think
Yes.
those books are, if there is such a thing as anointed writing outside of Scripture, uh, some of his stuff is just phenomenal for that. You can read it once, read it twice, read it 3 times, and still come away with new insights.
Mhm. Yep.
Stuff. And having met him in person a few times and time with him when I lived in Atlanta, it's easy to understand why. I think he just got a very unique anointing on his life. And I followed him way back when he was a young guy coming up. So I've seen how the Lord has used him. You want to talk a little bit before we get toward the end, a little bit about how your faith, your work, and you got your faith, your work life, your family life, all of that. How do you keep all that stuff together? How do you integrate? I know you got a stressful job and you got a wonderful wife and family. So how do you manage to integrate all this stuff together and keep balance?
So when I was considering getting going back into the engineering or into manufacturing, I always had this stigma about manufacturing that there's a bunch of roughnecks that sit there and cuss, and it's exactly opposite from that. Maybe in the 80s it was probably maybe like that, but now I find that it's not so much like that, and it's probably a byproduct of different laws that have been created to kind of make the manufacturing plant a more professional environment. But that outside of that, having the faith that I have and the the Christian leaders that have mentored me, it's made me who I am as a manufacturing leader. So Tabit, we have a new building that we we broke ground on actually a month before the COVID breakout. Prior to that, we had one little tiny building. Uh, and then when they broke ground over here and poured the foundations, every single morning, I would walk the foundation and pray over the company, pray that the leadership of the company would prosper and that anybody in leadership that didn't have Christian values would um, adopt the Christian values. That made a huge impact, and uh, I don't think I've ever told my boss that I prayed over his company, but he's reaped the benefits from it. Part of the prayer was in the small building, we had no space to put any parts we were making. We had so much going on, we had no space. And one of the prayers that I had was, God, make this building as full as the other building. And 5 years later, we have no space in this building,
Well, yeah,
uh, which is a good problem.
yeah.
Um, and having the faith that's the linchpin of everything. Being it dealing with the stresses of work and being able to walk out that front door after I'm done for the day and drive home and not allow the stresses of the day to affect my family life. That's all centered around faith and being able to distinguish where the work stops and where the family relationships and the relationships with God continue.
I've heard people talk about this that they're really, I can't remember when I first heard someone say that you're never going to get everything in balance. So it's more, that's why I use the word integration. Um, I was never able to get, when I was coming up, I got training, we're supposed to have a work life balance. I was never able to achieve that. My kids will tell you that. Um, that it's always there's always the stresses of work, the stresses of home, all that kind of stuff going on. But when I was able to start thinking about uh, integrating my faith into everything I did back when I was younger, that seemed to make a big difference for me. In the beginning, it was kind of like people wanted you to you got your church life, your faith, you've got family, you've got work, you've got school or whatever else you're doing. And I never could it was stressful for me trying to figure out how to balance that all out. And then someone said, "Well, you're never gonna get there, just forget that. Forget about that, and just try to integrate your faith into your work. You don't have to beat people over the head. You don't have to take your King James Bible to work every day and make everybody, uh, uh, uncomfortable with preaching at them or whatever. Just live your Christian life the way you want it lived." And the way you think Christ would have you live it. And that's going to open doors for conversations and so on. And I remember kind of going through that thinking, I should probably hand these people a tract or give them a sermon or something. But that's not effective in the workplace. Maybe it never was, but just integrating it, I think that helped me a lot. When you think about this generation of people you're working with now, the younger ones. So, what kind of things in terms of legacy? What kind of lessons would you leave for these younger people coming into the field?
So I would say one of my biggest focuses on redesigning the engineering process is to create um, not a division between engineering and production and quality, but that we're all one group. And over the years, I'd heard from other different companies that there's always been friction between engineering and production. In the construction industry, there's friction between the architects, the drafters, and the construction workers. And my goal is that uh, engineering, or at least what I'm able to control and build, is not that friction that we're engineering for manufacturing instead of engineering something and say, okay, here's the print, figure it out. And that comes with open communication with everybody. Having an open door policy where if there's a part on the machine and they have a question, they can come into any of our offices at any time. And the other side is for the youth, understanding that technology and modernization is not always the answer, especially in manufacturing. We lose a lot when we rely on simulate a part in a machine working perfectly. But if I don't see it running on the machine physically, I don't know that it's really working. So the youth have to understand that as they grow up with this technology all around them, that's what they're learning. They also have to take a step back and figure out how we got there in order to be able to continue to progress and integrate technology with the people. Because once we embrace technology fully and forget about the people, then what's the use of any of it?
Right. So, if you get to the point where well, hopefully you won't be like me. I never retire. I've been retired 3 times, and it never lasts but a few months, and then I'm back to work again. But let's say you did eventually leave and go do something else with your life. What do you want people at this company to say about you when they think, if your name comes up or whatever, what kind of things you want to leave behind? What kind of things would you like to hear them say about you and your leadership?
That I helped transform the company and that I stood on my principles. Most people here know that I'm Christian, and not because, like you said, I don't beat them in the head with the King James Bible, but they can judge me by my fruits. And that's what I would prefer. It's not even the end result that I can program 50 machines. That doesn't matter. What matters is what did I leave behind as far as the impact on people's lives?
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's always amazing to me when I run into somebody that I had some form of influence on. Sometimes you don't even know, right? You don't even know the influence you're having on someone. Um, Amazing. Tell me a little bit about where you see things going in terms of technology going forward. I know the AI piece, that's going to be, I'm sure, a big factor, but what else is coming down the pipeline in terms of your world?
I think that we're going to see a lot of cobots, robotic engineering, infiltrate manufacturing as a supplement for not having skilled trades. As we hear our nation's leaders talk about bringing manufacturing back to the states, we don't hear enough about standing up schools to teach more skilled trades and how to integrate the technologies with skilled trades. And the only way to combat that is by putting a robot next to a press brake. And I would expect to see as the robots that they're developing continue to progress, we'll start seeing more of those inside manufacturing plants.
So what's going to happen to the workers then? Are they going to shift their roles?
I don't know that that's really going to be a problem because, like I said, the skilled trades, they there are not very many people willing to learn skilled trades or even have the ability to because of the lack of um, schooling, lack of focus on that. Uh, Now, the current workforce, it really depends on how the customer or how the company is set up. Tabit, we're focused on people. Even though we have to fill the gaps in using technology, the focus is that we're not putting somebody out of work because we put a robot on a machine. It's okay, you're going to start programming the robot, or you need somebody to maintain the. You still even if you have a factory full of robots, you still need people to maintain them and work them. And
So, what do you
with
guys do to invest in those people? What kind of things do you do? You mentioned training earlier. It's just training's ongoing. It's not like an event. It's ongoing. What other kind of things does a company do to build value into the people side?
most of it's just a continuous training, and it's not just if you're a press brake operator or a CNC mill operator. Um, Part of training and continuing to invest is teaching them other skills. Okay, well, you can run this machine. Let's teach you how to run this machine as well, to continue to increase their skill sets.
So, kind of cross training, keep their knowledge base growing, that kind of thing. Uh, what do you guys do in terms of sending people out for more education? Do they some of your people continue to grow academically while they're doing this?
For the most part, we don't do a lot of that. The leaders, we do have leadership schools that we send new leaders to different leads for the different areas. We currently are in a what they call Cobot Alliance with the shipyard and a bunch of other companies where we actually have a training facility on our premises
Mm.
to train the welders who have always used just manual weld machines to program the cobots to do the welding as well. That's a continuous thing where we usually send 1 to 2 welders there on every class that they have.
So it sounds like learning, education, all of those kind of things is just kind of built into the fabric of the company.
It has to be. There's really not too many outside sources for that. We actually were talking about that a couple days ago in one of our biweekly management meeting. One of the items on our list is training for welders, sheet metal mechanics, and various different areas. And it's really hard to find that outside source that isn't going to take the employee away from their actual jobs for too long.
What are we going to do if we can't get enough people trained? I know here in our area, I live in rural Arkansas now instead of the city. Um, I know there's a big push here. We have, the electric companies have they call it a school where these guys go become electricians that work on big high lines and all of that. We have a college that has an aviation program where people can go to learn those kind of skills. Um, where do you think all this is going if we can't get enough skilled uh, craftsmen. I call them craftsmen. I don't know what they would be called in other industries. I need plumbers, electricians. I need people to work on stuff.
Mhm.
Uh, and so what's going to happen if we don't get enough of those people? That's a concern that all of us have, I think.
That's a huge concern, and I don't have the answer on what will happen if these companies come back to try to manufacture and they can't employ anybody. Because what's going to happen is that they're going to offer higher wages, and the smaller companies like Tabit won't be able to hire the only skilled trades that are out there. Um, I had a dream that if I ever won the lottery or got a huge windfall, that I would stand up a huge trading facility. I think what really needs to happen is all the companies that make all these manufacturing machines, like CNC mills or even the weld machines or the laser cutting machines, they need to create an alliance. And if they want to be able to continue to sell their machines in factories, they should create an alliance that stands up a training facility to offer skilled trades for free.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I know, and it's a lot of things are industry specific too, and I think that's where we've got to look as well. I did a spoke at a conference not too many years back on the lack of knowledge workers. I was able to pull down a bunch of research. The and now that was in 2020. This is 2026. So within 6 years, all those predictions that the research said we're running out of people that know how to do certain things, and that knowledge base that they have is going away, and we don't know how to fill it. And so it's a little bit scary. It's not just in your industry. I think it's across the board. Any other thoughts and comments you might have for people listening who, they're going through the challenge of growing as a leader, growing as a project manager, growing as an individual? Kind of things would you say to some young people? Hey, if you're going to have a long, productive career, here's some things you probably should focus on.
Shouldn't focus on what you did yesterday. Should focus on what you want to do today. Focus on tomorrow. Um, you're, and also, it's not just for the young people; it's for older people. It's never too late. It's never too late to restart your career or learn the right way to be a good leader.
Excellent. Man, it's so good to reconnect with you, and I hope you'll come back